Hey guys, Carlos Colon here with Georgia Perimeter Homes, and today we're going to be talking about closing in escrow. What does that mean? What is escrow in the first place? So we're going to be talking about all this and more. So jump in. If you have not paid attention or seen one of our videos before, make sure to watch in the future after this video by hitting the subscribe button below and also hitting that notification bell so that every time that we release a new video, it comes to you first. So let's jump in. So, closing in escrow. So I hear this term all the time. Carlos, what does it mean? Are we in escrow? And I think we have to start this by understanding what in the world escrow is in the first place, okay? So, escrow. What does it mean? Escrow means a holder of some sort of money has money or will have money and we are now depositing that money to that holder, okay, which means there's some kind of financial commitment for this proceeding to go through. Now notice the way I've actually phrased this is very general, and that's on purpose for this reason. There are different meanings depending on what you're asking, okay? So let's say we're selling a house and you ask me, Carlos, are we in escrow yet? Okay, that is different from closing in escrow. Those are completely different questions. So the first one, are we in escrow yet? What that's asking me is, Carlos, has the buyer turned in the earnest money? Okay, which implies a financial commitment to proceed with the contract. So that also implies, has the holder acknowledged that they've received the money to proceed with this contract from the buyer? Okay, that's usually a really good sign that they're going to follow through. Okay, that is very different from the closing and escrow question. Okay, so depending on who the holder is, this is what that means. So now let's jump into now. What does the question of closing and escrow mean? Well, I'm going to give you a scenario because this applies to most sellers as well as buyers. Okay, so especially if you're selling and then buying simultaneously, which most people do. So let's say that you've got two closings in one day, or maybe you've got one day and one the next. Here's where we're going with this. I need to sell my home in order to buy. So I need these two transactions to happen close together. In a perfect world, they happen in the same day. But because of some kind of restriction, whether it be the lender involved, my lender on the purchase, or my buyers for my listing, my buyer's lender, they have to close on the sale of my home later in the day. But I still have to go ahead and do the closing for my purchase that same day. Well, what happens? All right. We then schedule them backwards, and we do what's called closing in escrow. Okay? Backwards meaning, although I need the money from the closing and the sale of my home in order to purchase the new home I'm going to buy, I can sign all the documentation and everything can be ready. And when this next closing happens, that money will come in and complete this other transaction. But they don't necessarily happen in the right order, so we're going to hang on to the paperwork and then when the money comes in, complete it. So let me simplify it. We go to the day of closing. I'm signing on the dotted line for the purchase of my new home, but I have not completed the sale of my home, so this one can't actually fund. So the seller for the home I'm buying isn't actually going to get money yet. Okay? So, but we're all going to sign that we're in agreement. All right? So we sign that morning. Everything's there. I may or may not get the keys because I haven't really paid for it yet. So I probably won't get the keys at that point. But then that afternoon, let's say it's 3-4 hours later, I'm then now the seller for my home, and I'm signing on the dotted line to sell my home. And then at that point, the buyer who's getting a loan or paying cash, whatever it is, they have now submitted funding approval from their lender, and that money has now come to the attorney. Guess what? Now that means that I have now been paid as well because the attorney is holding my money as well from the sale of my home, and they can go ahead and authorize the funding for my new purchase as well on the same day. but I closed them backwards. So at the time that I actually signed the documents for the purchase of my home, the money wasn't really there yet. So we closed in escrow, and then the money came later, and we went ahead and funded. Notice that the term escrow was used two very different ways there. But the idea of we are closing through money coming in at some point in time here, stands true for a closing. Okay, just for are we in escrow for earnest money deposit means something completely different. Okay, so this can also happen as far as closing in escrow in different days, especially when you have a cash deal on one end, because those regulations are not the same as closing with a loan. So if you have a cash closing, sometimes you can go ahead and sign days in advance of the closing, and then the attorney, as long as they're okay to do this, and every attorney is different, so just ask your closing attorney. If I'm paying cash for a property, I might sign my paperwork well in advance, a couple days, and maybe I'm finishing the sale of something 5 days later, and that's what's going to fund that. That would be okay too. That's closing in escrow. And so, has the closing actually happened? No, not really. What an attorney does in that situation for closing in escrow is they hold on to the paperwork until the file has funded. Once it's funded, then they go ahead and release checks and do everything else and start the proceeding on recording. Recording meaning the documentation that has to be sent to the courthouse for you to be the new owner. So that's it. That's how it starts. That's what that means. And I know that there's you have to understand that those are two very different questions. And so make sure you understand which one you're asking. Because if you're asking, hey, have we closed yet in escrow? And you're actually talking about the earnest money being turned in, the question won't make any sense. So if you have any comments or you think I got this wrong, for example, hey, I want to hear it. If you have any experiences, with this, go ahead. Come down in there. I'm not a fan of closing in escrow, just so you know, because that means that anything can happen. Give you an example. I'm buying my new home. I'm closing an escrow in that morning on the promise of me selling in that afternoon. And all of a sudden that afternoon, everything blows up. But you just gave me the keys and I just moved in anyway. That could be a nightmare. So just talk to your agent about this to make sure that you've protected yourself and your agent is helping you to not end up in this crazy squatter situation that it could be. So give us a call, 770-314-1285, or check out our website at www.georgiaperimeterhomes.com. Thanks.